The morning light filtered in through the towering windows of the Carter mansion, casting golden streaks across the marble floor. Emily Carter's footsteps echoed softly as she walked down the grand hallway, past framed photographs of perfect moments, a wedding in Tuscany, a family picnic in Central Park, Olivia's third birthday party with a unicorn cake and Daniel beaming proudly at her side. To anyone looking in, it was the portrait of a life most women only dreamed of. A multimillion-dollar estate in the heart of Manhattan. A husband listed in Forbes' top tech titans under 40. A bright, beautiful 5-year-old daughter who adored her. The world envied her life. And yet, as Emily's fingers brushed against the cold surface of a crystal vase perched on a gold-trimmed console table, all she could feel was the chill of loneliness. She stepped into the living room where designer furniture sat untouched, arranged for admiration, not comfort. The silence of the house was deafening. It was too pristine, too still, as if even the walls knew to keep quiet around secrets. She sank into a velvet armchair, wrapped in a cashmere robe, coffee untouched on the side table. Daniel had already left hours ago. Another early meeting. Another missed breakfast. Another excuse. Lately, everything about her husband felt distant. He came home late, if at all. When he did, he kissed her on the forehead with robotic affection and quickly retreated into his home office. The scent of expensive cologne would linger in the air, but his presence never truly did. She had started noticing subtle shifts, the way he angled his phone screen away when she entered the room, the sly text notifications that lit up during dinner, the way he'd jump to take a quick call that lasted hours. The intimacy between them, once soft and playful, had been replaced with polite distance and awkward silences. Still, Emily tried to rationalize it. Daniel was under immense pressure. His company was gearing up for an IPO that could elevate their fortune beyond imagination. Investors were breathing down his neck, meetings stretched into the night, and the stress showed in the lines deepening on his forehead. She reminded herself that this was just a rough patch. All couples went through them. She had made vows, for better or worse. Maybe this was just the worse. And yet, her instincts refused to rest. Emily was a woman who had built her life around gut feelings. She had trusted her instincts when she chose Daniel at that campus tech showcase years ago. She had trusted them when she left her promising architecture career to support him full-time, raising Olivia and helping manage their home. Her intuition had never failed her, until now. Or perhaps it wasn't failing. Perhaps it was warning her. She stared at the blank TV screen across the room and caught her own reflection. Her eyes, usually calm and collected, looked uncertain. Not broken, no, not yet, but quietly unraveling. Somewhere behind the designer clothes and picture-perfect smiles, something ugly was lurking. She didn't have proof. Not yet. But every fiber in her body whispered the same dreadful word. Affair. And that whisper was getting louder. It was meant to be a night of celebration. Daniel's company had reached the final stages of its IPO deal, and Emily had planned to make a surprise appearance at the executive cocktail party being held at his exclusive penthouse suite on the Upper East Side. She had spent the afternoon getting ready, her makeup done flawlessly, her black silk dress hugging her figure just right, and her heels tall enough to match the kind of power walk she intended to make when she arrived. For weeks, she had been an outsider in her own marriage, sidelined, watching Daniel drift further and further away. Tonight was supposed to be her way back in. A way to show up, shine, and remind him what he had. She held a bottle of rare vintage wine in one hand and clutched her handbag tightly in the other as the elevator doors opened directly into Daniel's penthouse. The suite was quiet, strangely quiet. No sounds of clinking glasses, no soft jazz playing from the speakers, no murmured voices or laughter from guests. Just silence, thick and uneasy. Emily stepped out, her heels clicking sharply on the polished marble floor as she called out, "Daniel!" No answer. She frowned, setting the wine bottle gently on a nearby glass table. The air felt too still. She moved cautiously through the space, her eyes scanning for signs of life. The living room was pristine, untouched. Fresh flowers in the vase, champagne glasses on the bar cart, 2 of them. Half full. still sweating with condensation. Her breath hitched. And then she heard it, a soft giggle, feminine and flirty, echoing faintly from the bedroom hallway. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she moved toward the sound. Her hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from a building fury she had tried for weeks to suppress. The hallway seemed longer than usual, each step she took sounding louder than the last. The laughter came again, followed by a low male voice she recognized in an instant. Daniel. She didn't knock. She didn't pause. She simply turned the handle and pushed the door open. The scene hit her like a slap. Daniel was in bed, shirtless, tangled in silk sheets with a woman she immediately recognized, Vanessa Blake. She was laughing, one hand on Daniel's bare chest, the other twirling a strand of her perfectly styled blonde hair. Her lips were painted red, her lingerie barely covering anything at all. For a moment, neither of them noticed Emily standing there. And then Vanessa turned. She didn't gasp. She didn't cover herself or apologize. Instead, she smirked. Daniel bolted upright, eyes wide, face draining of color. Emily, wait. I can explain, this isn't. Emily said nothing. Her expression was calm, almost disturbingly so. She stepped forward, heels still clicking against the hardwood floors, and reached into her handbag. With deliberate precision, she pulled out 2 thick envelopes and placed them on the nightstand beside Daniel's Rolex and Vanessa's discarded bra. These are for you, she said, her voice cold, clear, and controlled. One is for divorce. The other is for emotional damages. I suggest you both read carefully. Daniel stared at the envelopes as if they were live grenades. Vanessa blinked, the smirk slowly sliding off her face. You brought court papers? Daniel's voice cracked as he tried to process the moment. Emily, this doesn't have to be. Yes. She cut him off, eyes fixed on his. I had them drafted last week. All I needed was confirmation. And now, she looked toward the bed, toward Vanessa. I have it. Vanessa pulled the sheet higher around her chest, the arrogance quickly replaced by discomfort. You don't have to be dramatic, she muttered. Emily tilted her head slightly, amused. Oh, darling. This isn't drama. This is legal action. Daniel swung his legs over the bed, attempting to move toward her. Please, let's just talk. Emily, don't do this right now. Not here. She took a step back. Don't touch me. His face twisted into something between panic and shame. It was a mistake. No, she replied, her voice almost soft. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. This was a decision. And now, I'm making mine. She turned to leave, not glancing back. Her posture was straight, chin high, every step radiating quiet power. Behind her, Daniel called her name again, but she didn't stop. She walked past the champagne glasses, past the forgotten wine bottle, and into the elevator. As the doors closed, she looked at her reflection in the mirrored walls. There were tears behind her eyes, but not of weakness, of release. It was done. And she had walked in on her worst fear and walked out with her dignity intact, and her power fully reclaimed. As Emily sat in the quiet of her room, divorce papers now in motion and her once perfect life fracturing like glass, her mind drifted backward, uninvited but unstoppable. Memories flooded in, bittersweet and stinging. She could still see it clearly. The day she first met Daniel Carter, wide-eyed and brilliant, standing beside a booth at their university's startup fair. His ideas were bold, his charm electric. He had pitched a tech platform with such conviction that a crowd had gathered. Emily, then a rising star in architecture, hadn't gone to the fair to be impressed, but she had been. He pursued her relentlessly, but not in the cliché, overconfident way. He listened, admired her designs, asked about her ambitions. He spoke of shared dreams, travel, building something together, a future where their talents would combine. It was intoxicating. He made her feel like the center of a storm, powerful and seen. By the time they graduated, they were inseparable. He proposed on the rooftop of her first big design project, promising her the world. And she believed him. When his tech startup gained traction, and investors began pouring in, Emily had just received her first offer to co-found a boutique firm in the city. It was everything she'd worked for. But Daniel, stressed and overwhelmed, asked her to wait, to help him stabilize the company and manage the growing demands of his life. "Just for a little while," he said. "Then we'll chase your dreams next." She put her ambitions on hold, trusting the man who swore they were in it together. She helped organize his schedules, managed the early chaos, and when Olivia was born, she poured every ounce of her energy into building a home and raising their daughter. She told herself it was temporary, that once things settled, he'd make good on his promises. But he never did. Looking back, the red flags were everywhere, woven into the fabric of their marriage. There were the nights he made decisions about the company without consulting her, even though she had been there from day one. He'd nod as she spoke, but his eyes would glaze over, already thinking ahead to his next meeting. When she voiced concerns, he'd brush them off, call her too emotional, or say she didn't understand the pressure he was under. "I'm doing this for us," he'd say, as if that justified everything. And then there were the business trips. They grew longer and more frequent. First once a month, then every other week. She'd wake up in bed alone, Olivia curled beside her, and scroll through photos of Daniel smiling at gala events halfway across the world, usually with Vanessa nearby. At first, she gave him the benefit of the doubt. He was building an empire. Sacrifices had to be made. But the sacrifices were always hers. The affair was just the final blow. The betrayal had started years ago, not in hotel rooms or whispered phone calls, but in the way he slowly stopped looking at her like a partner and started seeing her as a fixture. She had become part of the furniture in the life she helped him build. Beautiful, silent, and easily replaced. Emily blinked, wiping away a tear that had trailed down her cheek. It wasn't just about the woman in his bed that night. It was about every broken promise, every lonely evening, every word left unsaid. She had loved him with everything she had. And he had taken that love and used it as a stepping stone on his climb upward, never once looking back. But now, she was done looking back too. The courtroom smelled of old wood, tension, and cold ambition. The air crackled with restrained drama, the kind reserved for high-stakes divorces involving public figures. Emily Carter walked in wearing a navy blue pantsuit tailored to perfection, calm, composed, and unreadable. Cameras flashed from outside the courthouse, reporters shouting her name, but she didn't flinch. At her side was Ava Reynolds, her best friend since college and now her legal gladiator. Known across the city as one of the most ruthless divorce attorneys, Ava was brilliant, unshakable, and deadly with her cross-examinations. She had only one rule: don't back down. Ever. Daniel sat across the room with his legal team, his expensive suit looking stiff against the sweat forming on his brow. He avoided Emily's gaze, fiddling with a pen, jaw clenched tight. To his right sat Vanessa Blake, looking less like the seductive event planner who had flaunted her conquest weeks ago, and more like a woman out of her depth. She wore muted tones and a calculated look of remorse, her posture designed for sympathy. But Emily had seen enough of her performance to last a lifetime. The proceedings began with Daniel's team arguing that the split was amicable in spirit, and that the assets should be divided reasonably. Ava leaned back in her chair, smiling faintly, as if waiting for a bad actor to finish a monologue. Then Vanessa's attorney stood and claimed that his client had been unaware that Daniel was still in a committed marriage at the time of their involvement. There was an audible scoff from someone in the courtroom. Emily didn't move. Her hands stayed folded in her lap. But her eyes? They burned. Ava stood and approached the bench. "Your Honor," she began, voice steady and cutting, "we have records that clearly indicate Vanessa Blake received multiple luxury items, housing allowances, and wire transfers from Mr. Carter during the duration of his marriage, including a down payment for a penthouse and 2 vehicles purchased under a Shell LLC connected to Daniel's holding company." The courtroom shifted. Reporters in the back began typing faster. Ava continued, "Furthermore, We have reason to believe Mr. Carter attempted to hide a portion of his net worth by moving assets offshore and creating silent partnerships under names belonging to former interns and third-party agents. This is not only dishonest, it's financial fraud. Daniel's attorney stood to object, but the judge allowed Ava to continue. Screens lit up at the front of the courtroom. Exhibits A through G, bank statements, email threads, property deeds, each one a nail driven into Daniel's credibility. Emily had seen these before, in Ava's office late one night, but watching them come to life in court was surreal. Everything Daniel had built was now under scrutiny. The same empire she had once helped him grow now stood on trial, teetering. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably as her name appeared linked to multiple large deposits and luxury expenditures billed as consulting fees. Ava turned sharply toward her. Ms. Blake, would you like to explain why a non-employee received over $200,000 from Carter Global's discretionary fund during a period in which you were attending private trips with Mr. Carter to Milan, Dubai, and St. Bart's? Vanessa tried to speak. I thought it was part of a brand collaboration, Daniel told me. Ava didn't blink. So you benefited financially, knowingly or not, from a married man's company, during his marriage, without official employment. Is that correct? The silence spoke louder than any answer. Emily watched as Daniel squirmed in his seat, his empire unraveling thread by thread. Still, she didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She simply held her gaze forward, the picture of grace under fire. Let them paint her as cold. Let them call her ruthless. She had been quiet for too long. Outside the courthouse, the headlines exploded. Billionaire CEO hid millions from wife. Lawyer reveals secret mistress fund. Paparazzi flooded social media with shots of Emily exiting the courtroom like a queen returning from battle. Her face was stoic, her stride confident. The public adored her. The woman who walked in on betrayal and walked out with her spine straighter than ever. And this was just the beginning. The first headline broke less than an hour after Emily exited the courthouse. Millionaire tech CEO caught in explosive divorce scandal. Wife drops bombshell lawsuit over secret mistress fund. The article went viral within minutes. By the next morning, Emily's name was plastered across every major outlet. New York Times, Vogue, The Cut, CNBC. It was no longer just a messy divorce, it had become a cultural moment. Photos of Emily, shoulders squared, eyes fierce, circulated online, accompanied by captions like, "Strength in silence," and "She didn't just leave. She lit the match." Women flooded comment sections with praise and support. Journalists praised her composure and strategy. Victims of similar betrayals reached out with their stories. Emily, who had once lived in Daniel's shadow, now stood fully in the light, and the world watched with admiration. Requests for interviews flooded in. Morning talk shows, podcasts, magazines, all wanted her perspective. And she gave it, carefully and intentionally. She didn't gossip. She didn't take shots. Instead, she spoke with clarity and compassion about something far more universal than infidelity: emotional neglect, financial dependence, and the quiet unraveling of one's identity in a marriage where love became performance. In one televised interview, she looked into the camera and said, "There are millions of women who are told to be quiet, to be graceful, to be patient. I did all of that. And it nearly broke me. This isn't about revenge. This is about reclaiming what was mine all along. My voice, my name, my worth." The quote went viral. Daniel, meanwhile, was spiraling. Investors panicked. His public image, once that of a self-made visionary, was now tainted by scandal and greed. The stock prices for Carter Global dipped dramatically. Board members began holding emergency meetings behind closed doors. Brands quietly started pulling sponsorships and endorsements. Rumors of pending SEC investigations hovered like a dark cloud. Vanessa didn't fare much better. With her name linked to unethical payouts, she was quietly removed from multiple client events. Influencer partnerships disappeared overnight. She posted a half-hearted apology on Instagram, but it was too little, too late. The damage was done. And through it all, Emily remained a pillar of poise. She didn't engage in public drama. She didn't need to. Her silence, her truth, and her calm destruction of the lies that once surrounded her were louder than any tabloid headline. What the media saw was a woman scorned, but what the world fell in love with was a woman reborn. The storm had passed, but its wreckage lingered. In the quiet that followed the courtroom drama and media firestorm, Emily finally had space to breathe. For the first time in years, she wasn't just reacting, she was choosing. Choosing what to do with her time, her energy, her life. And her first choice was simple. She wanted to go back to what made her feel alive. Architecture. It had been years since she last sketched a blueprint, since she walked into a room and saw more than walls and windows. She used to see potential, rhythm, flow. She had traded her drafting table for diaper bags, her design meetings for investor dinners with Daniel. And though she never regretted being a mother, she regretted abandoning the part of herself that once burned with creative fire. That part was coming back. Ava introduced her to Liam Thompson again, an old college friend Emily hadn't seen in years. He had always been the quiet one in their architecture program, known for building with heart and purpose. Now, he ran a modest but respected design studio in Brooklyn. When they met for coffee, there was no pity in his eyes, only admiration. "I've been following your story," he said. "But I remember the Emily who used to stay up all night sketching buildings that looked like poems. You still have that in you." Those words settled deep in her bones. Soon, what started as a casual collaboration turned into something more. Liam invited her to co-design a small housing project in Queens, affordable, sustainable homes for single mothers recovering from domestic violence. Emily was hesitant at first, unsure if she still had the skills. But the first time she rolled out a blank blueprint on the table, it all came rushing back. Her hands remembered. Her eye for light, structure, and form had never left, just been buried beneath years of sacrifice. The work was different now. It wasn't about luxury or glossy magazine spreads. It was about impact. Emily and Liam decided to launch a boutique firm of their own, one rooted in purpose. They named it Foundation and Bloom, a name symbolizing both rebuilding and growth. Their projects focused on safe, dignified living spaces for women and families who had endured pain but still had hope. Each design became a kind of healing. Emily poured her soul into those blueprints, not just as an architect but as a survivor. She met with the women who would live in the homes they built, listened to their stories, cried with them, and took their needs seriously. These weren't just buildings, they were sanctuaries. And slowly, she began to rediscover herself. Not as someone's wife. Not as a headline. But as the woman she had always wanted to be. Independent, creative, and full of quiet fire. She worked late into the night, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Olivia would sit at her drawing table after school, doodling beside her mother. Sometimes Liam would join them, offering snacks and gentle laughter, becoming not just a business partner but a steady presence in her life. Emily no longer needed revenge. The world had seen what Daniel had done. She had nothing left to prove. What she needed, what she had found, was purpose. And in that purpose, she was building something greater than a home. She was building herself. Emily was hesitant at first, unsure if she still had the skills. But the first time she rolled out a blank blueprint on the table, it all came rushing back. Her hands remembered. Her eye for light, structure, and form had never left, just been buried beneath years of sacrifice. The work was different now. It wasn't about luxury or glossy magazine spreads. It was about impact. Emily and Liam decided to launch a boutique firm of their own, one rooted in purpose. They named it Foundation and Bloom, a name symbolizing both rebuilding and growth. Their projects focused on safe, dignified living spaces for women and families who had endured pain but still had hope. Each design became a kind of healing. Emily poured her soul into those blueprints, not just as an architect but as a survivor. She met with the women who would live in the homes they built, listened to their stories, cried with them, and took their needs seriously. These weren't just buildings, they were sanctuaries. And slowly, she began to rediscover herself. Not as someone's wife. Not as a headline. But as the woman she had always wanted to be. Independent, creative, and full of quiet fire. She worked late into the night, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Olivia would sit at her drawing table after school, doodling beside her mother. Sometimes Liam would join them, offering snacks and gentle laughter, becoming not just a business partner but a steady presence in her life. Emily no longer needed revenge. The world had seen what Daniel had done. She had nothing left to prove. What she needed, what she had found, was purpose. And in that purpose, she was building something greater than a home. She was building herself. The knock at the door was unexpected, firm, deliberate, and too early for delivery or press. Emily opened it cautiously, only to find a tall, silver-haired man standing with a worn leather hat in his hand and eyes that looked tired with years. Henry Carter. Daniel's father. They hadn't spoken in nearly a decade. Daniel rarely mentioned him, dismissing him as a relic of a painful past. Emily had only met him twice, both times brief and awkward. Now, here he was, standing at her doorstep like a ghost resurfaced. "Emily," he said softly, "I know I have no right to be here, but I'd like to talk. If you'll let me." She hesitated, then stepped aside. They sat across from each other in the sunroom, the silence between them thick but not hostile. Henry held a cup of tea with both hands, as though anchoring himself in the present. "I've watched everything unfold from afar," he began. "The media, the court. I just wanted to say, what Daniel did to you, it wasn't your fault. It never was." Emily said nothing, her gaze steady, waiting. Henry exhaled slowly. "His mother left me when Daniel was 13. Caught me cheating. I thought I'd buried that shame, but when I saw what my son had done, saw him follow the same path, I knew I'd failed again. And worse. I saw you stand there with the same expression she wore the night she packed her things." Emily's throat tightened, but she didn't interrupt. "I should have said something," he continued. "Warned you. But Daniel made it clear he didn't want me involved in his life. I stayed away out of guilt and fear. But I never stopped watching. And I want you to know. I always admired you. Your loyalty. Your grace. The way you held everything together." He paused, looking down into his tea. "I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner." For a moment, Emily let the words hang in the air. They weren't magic. They didn't undo the years. But they were honest. And that mattered. "I forgive you," she said softly, not for Daniel, not to erase the pain, but because she needed peace. Not every chain needed to stay locked. As Henry left, Emily stood taller. The past was still there, but it no longer held her. The fall was swift. Within weeks of the courtroom bombshells, Daniel's empire began to crack under the weight of scandal. Investors pulled out. Stockholders demanded answers. News anchors dissected every detail of the divorce, playing clips of Ava's courtroom reveals like scenes from a legal thriller. Public confidence in Carter Global plummeted. The board of directors, desperate to salvage what remained, called an emergency meeting. Daniel was voted out. His forced resignation made headlines. Tech titan toppled. Daniel Carter steps down amidst scandal and fraud allegations. His carefully curated reputation as a visionary crumbled overnight, replaced by terms like disgraced, unfaithful, and ethically compromised. The same media outlets that once celebrated him now dissected his downfall with glee. Vanessa, sensing the end of his influence, didn't bother sticking around. She quietly unfollowed him on social media and reappeared weeks later on the arm of a real estate tycoon 10 years older, her captions suddenly filled with quotes about healing and new beginnings. Daniel, stripped of power and abandoned by his accomplice, was left alone in the wreckage. But even in disgrace, he couldn't let go of the one person who had always grounded him. It started with flowers, bouquets delivered to Emily's office with no note. Then came the letters, handwritten and desperate, arriving weekly, filled with apologies and memories. He claimed he had changed, that he wanted to fix things, that Olivia deserved a complete family. Emily ignored them all. When he showed up unannounced outside Olivia's school, waiting near the gates in sunglasses and a worn coat, it was the final line crossed. Emily filed for a restraining order the same afternoon. In court, she faced him one last time. No anger, no outburst, just calm resolve. "You made your choice," she said, her voice unwavering. "You broke our family for your ego. I'm not your safety net anymore. Not your second chance. Not your way out." Daniel didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. As Emily walked out, the judge's signature drying on the protection order in her hand, she knew she had done what needed to be done, not just for her, but for Olivia. Some endings weren't about rage. They were about closing the door, locking it, and throwing the key where it could never be found. The months that followed were quiet in a way Emily hadn't known for years. Not empty, but peaceful, like finally stepping out of a storm into stillness. Her days were filled with blueprints and client meetings, school pickups and bedtime stories. And through it all, Liam was there. Not hovering, not pushing, just there. A steady presence in her life that asked for nothing but gave everything gently. He didn't arrive with grand declarations or sweeping gestures. Instead, he brought Olivia art supplies and sat on the floor to draw silly houses with her. He remembered Emily's favorite coffee order. He showed up at city zoning meetings and waited 2 hours just to give her a high five when they approved her firm's first large-scale housing project. He never made her feel like she owed him anything. That, more than anything, made her start to trust again. There were moments when she caught him watching her, not with desire, but with admiration. Like he was proud of the woman she had become. And slowly, Emily let herself feel again. Not with urgency or desperation, but with quiet curiosity. Could love grow where everything else had once broken? One afternoon, they took Olivia to the park after school. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the playground, and Olivia ran off to join a group of giggling girls chasing bubbles. Emily and Liam sat on a bench beneath an old oak tree, sipping iced tea and watching her laugh. "She's amazing," Liam said, nodding toward Olivia. "You've done a hell of a job, Em." Emily smiled, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Some days I still feel like I'm faking it. Like I'm just holding things together with tape and coffee." "You're not," he said quietly. "You're holding it together with grit. And heart. And brilliance." They sat in silence for a moment, the wind gently rustling the leaves above them. Then Liam turned to her, expression serious but soft. "You don't need anyone," he said. "You've already proven that to the world. But, if you ever want someone to stand beside you, not in front, not behind, just beside you, I'd be honored to be that person." Emily's breath caught. Not because she was surprised, but because the words didn't feel like pressure. They felt like permission, to let someone in, slowly and freely. She reached for his hand, not as a promise, but as a beginning. And it was enough. The grand opening of the Bloom Center drew a crowd that wrapped around the block. City officials, local press, former clients, women's shelters, and families who had been touched by Emily's work. The newly finished building stood tall against the skyline, an elegant structure of soft angles and open glass, inviting light into every corner. It wasn't just an architectural marvel, it was a symbol of second chances, a space where stories of pain would transform into ones of purpose and growth. Emily stood at the podium, a vision of calm strength in a cream-colored dress, her hair pulled back, a faint smile playing on her lips. Behind her, a brass plaque gleamed, "The Bloom Center for Women and Families, designed for hope." She took a breath and looked out at the audience, locking eyes with Olivia in the front row, dressed in a lavender dress and beaming with pride. She began. "This building isn't just made of steel and stone," she said, voice clear and strong. "It's built from broken promises, hard lessons, and the fire that rose from betrayal. Every corner, every light fixture, every hallway was drawn with intention, not just to shelter, but to heal." There was a pause, and you could hear a pin drop. "I once believed that love meant sacrifice. That silence was strength. That giving up my dreams for someone else's success was noble. And for years, I poured myself into someone else's story. But when everything fell apart, I realized something important. I still had my own story to write. She glanced at Liam, standing just off stage, his eyes soft with pride. Then back to Olivia. My daughter deserves to see what it means to stand tall after falling hard. She deserves to know that women don't just survive betrayal, we rebuild from it. We rise. Applause swelled, some wiping away tears. Emily stepped down from the podium, walking confidently along the stone path she had personally designed to lead into the center's heart. Her heels clicked with each step, echoing like punctuation marks at the end of a long, hard-earned sentence. The sound reminded her of that night, walking in on Daniel, walking out with papers in her hand and her dignity intact. Only this time, she wasn't walking away from pain. She was walking toward something. Toward purpose. Toward freedom. Toward the version of herself she had almost forgotten. The past had left scars, yes. But the future? It belonged entirely to her.